Good evening, sir. It's a pleasure to do this with you. And, I think we have about 30 minutes, so we'll try to cover quite a bit. I wanted to start out by just maybe you laying your perspective on the indigenization thrust that as a nation I know it's been something, as you saw in the video, this is not yesterday, but I think in the last decade, I think this has become more broader, and I think the defense forces have now taken this up as a much more, a mission that is, more central to how everything will hopefully play out in the future. So just your perspective on that.
Prashant, first of all, thank you for inviting me to this event. When I was in DPIIT, I think I used to interact with the startup ecosystem much more, but I'm happy to sort of interact after moving to defense. I think defense is one of the few departments which has a structured program with the startup ecosystem of the country. But coming back to your main question about indigenization, I think from 2014 onwards, we've been pretty clear that this import dependency will have to be, we have to get rid of it in order to, reach some level of strategic autonomy. And what we've done so far in that area is primarily we've tried to make sure that imports are more of a, last option really. So nothing last year, for example, we spent about 1,70,000 odd crores in our capex. 81% of that was spent within the country. And in general, we have a policy that 75% of our capex will be spent domestically, whether it is on a Indian design, developed, manufactured, whether it is based on a TOT of some kind, or whether it is on a strategic partnership where you buy a small quantity from there and get the rest of it made here. But I think that process of ensuring that the bulk of our production takes place within the country is ensured by our procedure itself, which makes imports a kind of a last resort. Hopefully that is gradually creating a diversified, wide industrial base for manufacturing in this country.
But are there 2-3 categories where this challenge has been more difficult than others, and where there's still a lot more work to be done?
No, I mean, you're absolutely right. I mean, there are areas where we've really not moved the way we should have. Engines in general is a huge issue, whether it is the jet engine or even the larger capacity automobile and tank engines, or whether it is marine engines. We are entirely import dependent as of now. We've started the process of doing some projects with, we are doing one, for marine engines, we are doing a project with one of our leading industrial houses, which is under Make One, where we fund the development of an indigenous alternative. For the jet engine, unfortunately, there is no breakthrough. We are therefore looking at a decade-long program of co-development with one of the major international engine houses. In some of the other areas, like larger capacity auto and tank engines, we are doing some level of technology transfer followed by assembly and even manufacturing. But these are areas where there's a lot of work to be done. I don't know if one can, whether startups will have the scale to address these kind of issues, but I would suggest at least start with the smaller engines, the ramjet and scramjet type of technologies for drones and for missiles. Those are areas where, you could perhaps, work out solutions even on a very small scale, and that could be useful for the country's defense. But in general, yeah, I mean, those are the two sort of leading gaps that came to my mind, but there are many others as well. We'll talk about some more of them as we go along.
Yeah. Yes, and maybe the little bit on just for the startups here and in general, just a different I mean, there's lots of initiatives and programs across the board, right? From, like you said, the Make One, the IDEXs. Can you just kind of lay that out in the perspective of the scale of the startups for smaller, slightly more mature and advanced startups? What are the right programs today that kind of match that stage of a startup?
Yeah. So I think you would all be familiar with the IDEX. That is the only program where, by any government department, which actually provides startups with some level of support up to the prototyping stage for identified problem statements. The amount available is up to 25 crores. There are, I mean, the way I see it, after that development and prototype creation stage, it tends to kind of come to a shuddering halt in a way, because we are not giving enough visibility in terms of the follow-on orders. That I intend to address by reforming the procurement procedure, which is a separate exercise we are doing right now. In the next 3 to 4 months, we'll come out with that document, and we'll provide a separate procurement window for startups, which is a bit more ambitious than what the IDEX scheme does in itself. In the existing Make in India schemes, there is Make 2, where you can invest, develop a solution, and then come to us, and if we are impressed with it, and if it meets for our requirements, we can give you an order. And I want to mention that because this is one of the largest startup projects that we recently provided under Make 2, where we've given an order of almost 2,000 crores to one of the startup drone companies for building a certain type of specialized drone. So that's one avenue, but the problem with that is that you'll have to, put in the initial development cost yourself. And obviously all of you can't do that.
So how does that work? I mean, and is there identified areas?
That's right. So in this particular case, what happened was that the Navy, which was probably the most proactive among our services, identified a particular requirement. They did a market survey among different startups and companies, tapped one company which they thought had the capability of meeting that requirement, encouraged them to come up with a solution, and assured them that if you are able to come up with a prototype which meets your requirements, we'll give you a fairly significant order, not an IDEX type of order, much more, in thousands of crores actually. So that involved the company itself investing some few hundred crores of its own money, which I assume is the money of some venture capital.
Yes.
But it's reached a stage where it is about to go for flight trials. So yeah, I mean, that's one solution if you have enough access to capital. Others, you will have to, I guess, rely on the other categories, such as IDEX, to build the prototypes, and hopefully we can start supporting you through a kind of a spiral development model where you, as you develop the prototype, we'll start increasing the scale of the orders that we are able to give.
Maybe that's the change in IDEX that's positive, so we can kind of get it. And as the stages change, I think they can also venture funds get more confidence in participating.
Correct.
So it becomes a longer term collaborative exercise rather than just a one-off program.
Or
so maybe that's
a startup which has the financial muscle to sort of.
Yes.
Yeah,
so
I mean, that is probably the way to go for most of the startup companies. I would imagine that would be the way to go. But the intent is to make it a bit more generous in terms of the initial lot of orders, not confine it to half a dozen prototypes, which obviously once you've got to that goal, thereafter, if you again have to go for a competitive process for the scalable order, it doesn't make much sense to spend so much time and effort. That's the part which I said I'll try to address through this revision of the DAP 20, our procurement document in the next 3 to 4 months.
You want to talk a little bit about that DAP changes that one can expect, sir, that are startup friendly?
Yeah, so the intent is to make the DAP document provide some kind of a window for the startup community. In addition, the DAP process right now has a lot of issues in terms of delays. I mean, the average time taken to go from accepting that a particular requirement is there for a service to actually signing the contract is about 3 to 4 years. Now, we intend to reduce it to not more than 2 years at the most, even for very complex platforms. It has 3 processes which take time. One is the creating the contract document, the RFP. Second is the field evaluation trials, and the third is the cost negotiation part of it. All 3 we intend to squeeze down as part of this revision process. There are other policy elements there which we will have to look at to encourage private sector to get orders on competitive bidding, to avoid the cost plus nomination based approach that we followed in the past when it comes to many of our equipment. I mean, for shipbuilding, for ships, for most other procurement categories, we've already made it a competitive process. For munitions, I was mentioning to you earlier that there used to be a kind of a de facto monopoly situation where you had to take an NOC from a public sector company in order to even bid for any requirement by the services. We are doing away with that. So in general, we'll move towards competitive bidding while creating some kind of a relaxed and liberalized procurement window for the startups in order to try and create a wider, more dynamic manufacturing ecosystem for the defense industry in the country.
Sir, if there's 2 models that I think make sense. Like one is you go in for collaborations, global collaborations, bring in IP, process IP in the country. And the second is, of course, you to the extent that you can do with domestic R&D. So in your view, from a startup perspective, is there a disadvantage for a startup when it comes to doing these global collaborations, but the larger companies can do them? So what is a hybrid model still what you recommend for startups when it comes to build? Because if otherwise the venture funds have a problem that the gestation is too long. And so, you know, we have been starting to think that even startups need to be smart in how they can bring in global IP and repurpose it here.
Yeah, that's a good question, Prashant. When it comes to procurement, I mean, I'm seeing it from the point of view of a buyer, the sole buyer in a sense for many of these defense-related products. There, I would say that in areas where we've developed a certain level of technological maturity, TRL 8 plus, which includes mostly DRDO technologies, and that includes areas like long-range missiles, armored vehicles, different types of land systems, artillery, rocket launchers. Those are areas where we are reasonably comfortable. We have multiple vendors, and we can largely meet our requirements within the country. For the ones below that, TRL level 1 to about 7 or 8, either you do your own design and develop, which may take time, or you bring in technology from abroad. Bringing in technology, we'll have to be pragmatic about it because I can't allow a capability gap to continue just because we are doing research or DRDO is doing
exactly,
research.
Yeah.
So the intent is primarily that but however, because we have fairly large requirements, in many cases where, other than the areas I mentioned where we've reached a certain level of technological maturity, in other areas, for the most part, it will have to be a domestic R&D, or it will have to be some kind of a technology transfer. Now, in that technology transfer, for complex systems, for fighter aircraft, I would imagine it will have to be fairly large domestic companies which can do that kind of work, or which can make that kind of investment. You need deep pockets for that. But in other areas of, drones, small drones of different types, cybersecurity, electronic warfare, sensors and radars, ramjet and scramjet I mentioned, smaller engines of different types. In all of those areas, I would imagine the startups could also, tie up with dynamic foreign companies who are looking for a large market like India, and who would be able to get access to this market only through a joint venture with an Indian company. Those are the areas where I would say you can certainly try And I mean, given the requirements that we have when it comes to areas like drones, I mean, to give you that particular example, we've just approved a large purchase of what we call the male category drones. That's a tender worth 30,000 crores, 20,000 crores for the drones and 10,000 crores for the PBL support over 10 years. Now that also has inbuilt provision that we'll give it to at least two companies, L1 and L2. So yeah, I mean, those are the areas where I'm sure small, medium, large, all types of companies can play in that space because it's really not, it's not really so complex or the funding requirement is not so huge that the advantage is only with the incumbents. I think startups and upstarts can also get into that space.
Are there a couple other areas like that that you see visibility, sir, from the next 2-3 years, like the male class? And there, of course, the whole spectrum of drones. That's one. Any other areas, submarines and these autonomous submarines?
I think all kinds of unmanned systems, yes. Drones and counter drones, both, yes. The experience from Ops Sindoor is that standoff weapons of different types, electronic warfare suits, sensors, drones and counter drones, different types of loitering munitions with good electronics so that it can, it can survive in a jamming or in a GPS denied environments. All of those are areas where there is tremendous scope for even smaller companies and startups to look at and get into that area. The requirement is so huge that particularly because we are about to create a drone unit in every battalion of the armed force, which of the army in particular, which essentially means we are looking at literally hundreds of thousands of. So visibility in terms of orders will come. I mentioned the male category drones. There will be many more at the lower level. End of the day, some of these categories like loitering munitions, smaller drones will become like munitions today. They would be like the revenue procurement that we used to do for bullets and shells. Those areas, the visibility in terms of orders will be much more. And those are areas where if you can get in at the right time with the right technology, sometimes maybe in collaboration with some of our public sector units, you would be able to, scale up pretty quickly.
I think the anti-drone technologies are also very fertile and critical, and the scale there can be very huge. I mean, you're probably talking about 1 million location. I mean, it's all assets everywhere, right?
Yes. Yeah, that's right. I mean, air defense is going to be a big issue given the decentralization of this kind of threat that has happened. And in that sense, one of the things we succeeded with was in terms of fitting our legacy equipment with modern radars or sensors, and sometimes with, fragmentation rounds are enough to take care of some of these, low-flying drones. So yeah, I mean, those are areas where a lot of potential work is there, and the services would be happy to work with you in some of these areas.
We were just discussing on the sidelines, sir, about this accelerating or catalyzing a bit more collaboration between the larger old PSUs and other. Any thoughts there on what can we do to kind of change that collaborative environment?
Yeah, sure. So one of the problems with the PSUs in particular is that they have the incumbency advantage, and they also used to have a certain level of monopolistic advantage. HAL is a case in point. I mentioned Munitions India, which had a kind of right of first refusal on any munitions order from the defense services. Now, we are trying to tear those barriers down, remove those monopoly or quasi-monopolistic kind of situations. It requires a change in culture from their side as well, because in many cases, you'll find that some of these integrated manufacturing units like HAL, what they will do, frankly, is that even if something is available off the shelf or in the private sector, in order to maximize profit, sometimes they will try to make it themselves, rather than, and perhaps waste the taxpayers' money as well, even though it may be available or a ready-made solution is available with some other company. To change that culture, perhaps, as we discussed, maybe we could do I mean, before we start nudging them further, maybe to start with, we get to know each other, and that can be done with maybe a large-scale workshop, maybe in Bangalore, which has a
Right.
lot of these public
Yes,
sector
right.
PSUs, defense PSUs, with the startup community, so that we understand each other better, and some of these entry barriers can evaporate, and people can, they will also find it easier to tap your expertise in certain areas, and hopefully that will enable them to fast track deliveries in certain areas where they are trying to sort of, or sometimes they're struggling with some potential problems, which could be addressed much more easily by tapping somebody in the startup community.
While we build this capability and let's say as we succeed in some of this indigenization, what's the export opportunity here, sir? And do you think that uh, is that very complex to look at defense exports, and there's even more geopolitical complexity even for a startup to look at global markets in this space?
So, I mean, let me answer it this way. Our defense production, the value of total sales within the country was 1,50,000 crores last year. The share of the private sector there was about 23%. In exports, on the other hand, the situation was reversed. We had exports of about 23,000 odd crores last year, I think, and over 60% was by the private sector. So it shows that it's not that complex, but it also shows that the private sector has the agility and the dynamism to, tap into export orders much more quickly. There are issues with export licenses, with various other formalities that go with it, including clearances from the Ministry of External Affairs in many of these cases. It's an area which we are trying to address closely in terms of ease of doing business by creating a single portal, creating a a single point of contact in the Department of Defense production. I think we've streamlined quite a few of the processes. So hopefully things will work out better, because our intention is to hit 50,000 crores in exports by 2030, and frankly, we are well on track to achieving it. But yeah, I mean, there are defense industry per se has an incumbency advantage primarily because of the barriers to entry. Some of those I mentioned. There are others in terms of licensing of different types, but the intent is to sort of tear them down over time. And I think when I was in DPIIT, one of the things I did was I increased the license period, which used to be 3 years, to about 15 years, because in 3 years, obviously, nothing can be done. So there's a hell of a lot more that needs to be done when it comes to the license, a kind of license permit Raj which prevails when it comes to the defense industry,
Right.
including in areas like explosives in particular, where PESO is those clearances are also tough. But the government intends to sort of tear down those barriers to a great extent, and in fact, I have a mandate from the top office to ensure that what we did in DPIIT in general, we try to do for the industry, we do specifically for the defense industry as well.
No, that's really encouraging, sir. And I think if you can do that with the startup lens that you have very good visibility of from DPIIT, I think that will go a long way in encouraging startups in the defense industry. So I thought we'll open up for a couple questions. We have a few minutes. Maybe anybody with a question from the audience? Couple questions. Yeah, there's one question here. Yeah.
Hi, thank you. That was very insightful. So I represent an SME in defense manufacturing, and I'm curious how SMEs can get involved in more innovative defense developments in manufacturing. That's something we struggle with, and we're sort of in the trap of, taking designs from the government and manufacturing it for them and not being able to innovate and create our own IP.
I did mention the IDEX scheme and the Aditi scheme there in particular, where you can potentially get up to 25 crores of funding for finding solutions to some of the problem statements that are put out by the services. Other than that, the other route is also one that I mentioned, which is Make2, where if you can develop a prototype in collaboration with the services, which meets our needs, then we can assure you a follow-up order of a fairly significant size. But specifically, I mean, what do you think is would help you most? I mean, I'd like to actually hear from you. What is it that you think we can do beyond the procurement window that I mentioned and the IDEX window that I mentioned? Is there anything else that we can do to make things easier for you? Because ultimately, if you are making components, I would want you to go up the value chain and perhaps become an OEM yourself in the longer run. But is there something we can do in that, I mean, that can help you sort of, make that break in a sense?
Yeah, maybe as you said, they can go from just
A component.
component to designing these components and value adding there, right? So there's a question here.
Hello. Hello, Mr. Singh. Thank you so much for your insightful talk. I'm Ankit Singhal. I'm a co-founder of a digital platform called Maps.io, where we are building, we are mapping the complete supply chain and creating a platform which is like a combination of LinkedIn and Alibaba by mapping the value chain and ecosystem of these emerging sectors to enable cross-border sales. The question that I have is, do you have a portal where government entities or PSUs can actually list out what technologies are they looking to indigenize in India or make in India? Because that will help a lot of the startups or even companies to support and accelerate the manufacturing.
Yeah, there is a portal like that. I think it's called Srijan. Just have a look at it. I think there are some 36,000 odd components listed there, which we've listed for digitization, but just have a look at it. I think there is a fairly well-established portal and it keeps getting revised as well, yeah.
So, or do all PSUs participate in it, or is it?
Set out by the Department of Defense Production, so it's for all PSUs.
All PSUs. There's one, last two questions. This one question here, and then this person.
So thank you very much. My name is Rajat Tandon from IVCA. Sir, the way you've supported when you were at DPIIT, the fund-of-fund structure through SIDBI, any thoughts on, sir, from the Ministry of Defense side, fund-of-funds which can enable typically towards manufacturing in this particular sector?
I think that fund-of-funds in any case is meant to be sector agnostic. It can fund defense startups as well. And if anybody needs funding from that window, I'm sure we can put in a word. I haven't thought about that, frankly, because frankly, defense is not a developmental department. Our role really is to use our buying power to support the industry in a sense. And of course, some elements of our DRDO, of course, can collaborate with DU or can enter into development production partnerships with respect to their technologies. But since you've planted that idea in my mind, let me think about it. As of now, we don't have a scheme like that. But in most cases, I would imagine you could use the fund-of-fund structure of SIDBI even for a defense startup as well.
Probably, like I said, at the IDEX stage, more collaboration with the funds maybe is another thing we can think about. The one last question. Okay, this. Yeah, please go ahead.
Me?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay.
Because you have the mic.
Yeah, sure. So my name is Abhinav and I represent an organization which does recycling. And the point which I'm making is that when you're looking at manufacturing, one of the biggest challenges that we are seeing in the recent times is that China, which is supplying a lot of the materials which go into manufacturing, has started to constrict supply. So the point which I'm making is, can we also look at a partnership with defense, given the fact that you'll have a very large manufacturing base, to actually create a sort of a corridor, at least a defense-led corridor, where we do recycling of materials that the defense has used and whatever has been factory waste in the case of manufacturing as well, so that we can have more resilient and stronger supply chains where we can be more reliant on our own material rather than being reliant on other countries.
Yeah, sure. We can have a discussion on this. India does have a lot of legacy equipment which wouldn't be scrapped, and probably recycling would enable us to sort of extract something valuable from it. Let's have a conversation about that. We can set it up sometime.
So we're really out of time. This is the last question here.
Hi, sir. This is Pratap from Captable Publication. So here. So drone indigenization has been a challenge for some time. And we have also been hearing about the Defense Ministry also been working on some sort of a framework to promote it. And this is public data, I think, which the Defense Ministry told the Parliament that almost 40% of even flight controllers are imported from China. Now, flight controllers is just one component, and it's an active component. There are others with radio and remote control and everything, where there is invariably a large dependence. So what are we, doing in terms of concrete, and can we expect something in the coming months that you're working on?
So, as you know, when it comes to drones, the regulatory power is actually with the Ministry of Civil Aviation. What we intend to do is, in the order that I mentioned, the large mail order, which is going to be launched soon, we intend to ensure that the critical technologies, the kind that you mentioned, will be, we will screen applicants on the basis of their ability to provide those technologies from indigenous or from, sources that are, where the import dependency can be minimized. And we've actually listed out intend to list out in the RFP the kind of technologies we have in mind. So yes, India, the Defense Ministry will use its buying power to ensure that actual deep indigenization in critical technologies takes place in order for anybody to get access to the kind of order that we have in mind.
Sure, sir. Thank you very much. Any final thoughts from your side?
No, not really. When I was in DPIIT, the only tangible thing I remember that I did for the startup community was that I got the angel tax abolished. That was the...
Thank you so much.
So in general, in government, there's a limited time to do certain things. What I have in mind in defense is to sign as many contracts as quickly as possible, which is the bugbear for the
great.
country,
And all
which we intend to keep doing. But in terms of deregulation and other areas, if there are any 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 big ideas that you have in mind, please come to us with those ideas, and I assure you we'll make it happen.
So we'll do that workshop, like you said. So in that we can have a little bit of 2-3 couple tracks and address some of these issues. So thank you so much. Thank you. The report launch. Yeah. So we'll do the report launch, Priyank. I want to, my colleagues from Accel, Vidya, Nayan.
Thank you so much, Shri Rajesh Kumar and
Pooja.
Mr. Prakash.
Pooja, come. No, you're part of it. Come. Come, Pooja. And sir, aap aa jaye.
Well, that was a very insightful discussion that we just had. And with that, it is now officially time to launch the report. Ladies and gentlemen, presenting to you the Accel Advanced Manufacturing Report 2025. Meanwhile, everyone, you all can